A flashing red and blue light filled the rearview mirror. For most drivers, it meant nothing more than a routine speeding ticket. But for a black man guiding a luxury car through an affluent, tightly policed suburb, the sight could transform an ordinary evening into pure nightmare. When an arrogant, prejudiced patrolman stopped a quiet, impeccably dressed driver on a rainy night, he believed he had found an easy mark. He threatened the man with years inside a concrete cell, completely unaware that the figure in handcuffs was a federal judge, the one person who could unravel his entire existence. The rain fell in relentless, freezing sheets, turning the asphalt of the interstate into a dark mirror of reflected taillights. Inside his meticulously maintained Lexus LS, the Honorable Elias Quinn released a long, heavy sigh. At 62, Elias had spent 3 decades navigating the intricate corridors of the American justice system. For the past 12 years, he had served as a federal judge for the United States District Court. I was a man of immense intellect, known for his stoic bearing, his razor-sharp legal mind, and a patience tempered in the fires of countless grueling trials. That day had been especially draining. He had spent hours presiding over a complex corporate malfeasance case, wading through mountains of dense financial language. All he wanted was the quiet of his home, a glass of neat bourbon, and a book that did not demand a legal dictionary. A massive pileup on the interstate forced a mandatory detour. His GPS guided him through Oakmont Hills, an ultra-wealthy, predominantly white enclave just beyond the city limits. Oakmont Hills was the kind of place where property taxes soared, lawns were trimmed with surgical precision, and the local police carried a notorious, unspoken reputation for aggressively guarding their borders. Elias adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and kept his eyes on the road, holding a careful 28 miles per hour in a 30-mile zone. I understood the unwritten rules. He had lived them all his life. A black man in a luxury car driving through a town like Oakmont Hills after dark was a magnet for trouble. It did not matter that he held a law degree from Harvard. It did not matter that his signature could authorize federal wiretaps or send a man to federal prison. In the dark, behind the wheel, he was simply a profile. A mile down the elm-lined residential avenue, an Oakmont Hills police cruiser sat idling in the shadows of a closed strip mall. Inside sat Officer Travis Kellerman. Kellerman was 34, with a high and tight haircut and an ego that far outstripped his badge. He had spent 8 years on the force, building a reputation through minor drug busts and aggressive traffic stops. Kellerman saw himself as the ultimate gatekeeper of Oakmont Hills, protecting its pristine streets from anyone he considered undesirable drifting in from the city. He bragged to his colleagues that he possessed a sixth sense for spotting people who did not belong. As Elias's Lexus glided past the dark parking lot, Kellerman's eyes narrowed. The car was clean, perhaps too clean. The windows carried a slight factory tint, yet not enough to hide the silhouette of the driver. Kellerman squinted and made out the profile of an older black man at the wheel. Instantly, the gears of his prejudiced mind began to turn. A high-end luxury vehicle, an out-of-town driver, a demographic that, in Kellerman's warped view, had no legitimate reason to be cruising through Oakmont Hills at that hour. He shifted the cruiser into drive and pulled out, falling in 2 car lengths behind the Lexus. Elias saw the headlights at once. A cold, familiar knot tightened in the pit of his stomach, a sensation he had not felt in years, not since his days as a young public defender driving through southern counties. He checked his speedometer, still 28. He checked his lane position, perfect. He signaled well in advance before making a slow, deliberate right turn onto a winding residential street the GPS insisted would lead back to the main highway. Kellerman followed. "Let's see what you do," he muttered, fingers drumming on the steering wheel. He watched the Lexus intently, waiting for the slightest infraction, a tire brushing the yellow line, a failure to signal a full 100 feet before a turn, a rolling stop. But Elias drove flawlessly. Frustrated, Kellerman decided he needed no real reason. A pretext would do. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. He keyed the radio, initiating a traffic stop on a black Lexus sedan, late model, Illinois plates. Suspicious vehicle, possible window tint violation, and failure to maintain lane." The dispatcher crackled acknowledgement. Kellerman reached up and flipped the switch. The night exploded in blinding red and blue. Inside the Lexus, Elias Quinn released a slow, quiet breath. He pulled over at once, guiding the heavy car safely onto the shoulder beneath a flickering street lamp. He shifted into park, shut off the engine, and rolled down the window. Then, following a lifetime of survival instincts, he placed both hands flat on the top of the steering wheel at 10 and 2 and waited. The rain drummed heavily against the roof. In the side mirror, Elias watched Officer Kellerman step out of the cruiser. The officer took his time, adjusting his duty belt, shining a high-powered tactical flashlight directly into Elias's side mirror to blind him before beginning the slow, deliberate walk toward the driver's door. As Kellerman approached, he unclipped the retention strap on his holster, an intimidation tactic, pure and simple. "Evening," he said, voice flat, tone dripping with unearned authority. He kept the flashlight beam locked on Elias's eyes, refusing to let the older man see his face clearly. "Good evening, officer," Elias replied. His voice was a rich, deep baritone, completely calm and free of the nervous flutter most citizens showed during a stop. He had faced cartel bosses and corrupt politicians in his courtroom. A local patrolman's aggressive posturing felt almost amateur. "Do you know why I pulled you over tonight?" Kellerman asked, leaning closer, eyes aggressively sweeping the immaculate interior. "I confess I do not," Elias answered smoothly. "I was driving under the speed limit. My registration is current, and my vehicle is in complete working order. Perhaps you could enlighten me." Kellerman's jaw tightened. He disliked the way this man spoke. The vocabulary, the absence of fear, the quiet dignity. To someone like Kellerman, a citizen's dignity felt like defiance. "You swerved back there," he lied without hesitation. "Failure to maintain your lane. Plus, your window tint looks illegally dark. Where you headed tonight, buddy?" The word buddy hung in the air, a deliberate microaggression meant to strip away respect. "I am heading home, officer," Elias replied, choosing for the moment to ignore the fabricated violations. "The interstate was backed up due to a collision, and my navigation system routed me through Oakmont Hills. I am simply passing through." "Passing through," Kellerman repeated skeptically. He shone the light into the back seat, searching for anything. A duffel bag, a stray wrapper, any scent he could twist into probable cause. There was nothing but a leather briefcase resting neatly on the passenger seat. "Whose car is this?" "It is my vehicle, officer." "You got a license and registration?" Kellerman demanded, tone hardening. "I do. My license is in my wallet, which is in my left interior jacket pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. With your permission, I will reach for them now." Kellerman paused, thrown by the hyper-compliant procedural manner of speech. It only aggravated him further. "Just get the license. Keep your hands where I can see them." Elias slowly reached into his tailored charcoal suit jacket, retrieved his wallet, and extracted his driver's license. He handed it through the window. Kellerman snatched it and shone the light onto the plastic. "Elias Quinn," he read aloud. He looked from the ID to Elias's face. "You live in the city, long way from home, Eli." As I explained, I was rerouted. "Yeah, I heard your story," Kellerman sneered. "What do you do for work, Eli?" Elias's eyes narrowed fractionally. Eli. He had tolerated the baseless stop. He had tolerated the lie about swerving. But the rapid descent into outright disrespect tested even his legendary patience. Still, he knew the law. The roadside was not a courtroom, and arguing with a man holding a gun and a badge was a fool's errand. "I work in the legal profession, officer," he answered carefully. He had no desire to pull rank. He abhorred the idea of flashing federal credentials to escape a traffic stop. He believed the law should apply equally to everyone, janitor or federal judge. If this officer was harassing him, he wanted to experience exactly what any other black man in his position would face, without the protective shield of his title. "Legal profession?" Kellerman scoffed. "What, you a paralegal? A clerk?" "I am employed by the federal government." Kellerman laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Right. Listen carefully. I've got a rash of burglaries in this neighborhood. High-end stuff. Guys coming in from the city, driving fancy cars they probably can't afford, casing the houses. You fit the description." Elias stared at him. "Officer, I am 62 years old. I am wearing a custom-tailored suit. Does it appear to you that I am casing homes in a rainstorm?" "Don't get smart with me, boy," Kellerman snapped, temper flaring. The thinly veiled racial slur struck the air like a physical blow. Elias's expression went entirely cold. The grandfatherly warmth vanished, replaced by the terrifying, statuesque stillness that usually preceded his most devastating courtroom rulings. "I highly suggest you reconsider your tone, officer," he said, voice dropping an octave, radiating absolute freezing authority. "And I suggest you run my license. Issue a citation if you truly believe I committed a traffic infraction, and allow me to go on my way. You have no reasonable, articulable suspicion to detain me any further." Was so believe that, oh my God. Kellerman stepped back, genuinely shocked by the command in the man's voice. Shock quickly gave way to blinding fury. Who did this guy think he was? In Oakmont Hills, nobody spoke to Travis Kellerman that way, especially not a black man pulled over in the dead of night. "Step out of the car," he ordered, dropping his hand firmly onto the grip of his service weapon. "On what legal grounds?" Elias asked calmly, hands remaining locked on the steering wheel. "Under Pennsylvania versus Mims, you have the right to order me out of the vehicle for officer safety. But considering I have been completely compliant and my hands have not moved, I must ask if you are giving me a lawful order or simply trying to escalate a situation because I bruised your ego." Kellerman's face flushed scarlet. He unholstered his taser with his left hand, aiming the red laser dot squarely at Elias's chest. "I said step out of the damn car, now, or I will drag you out and charge you with resisting arrest." Elias looked at the red dot painted on his suit. He looked at the trembling anger in the officer's eyes. He knew exactly how this script ended if he refused. He had presided over the civil wrongful death suits. He had watched the dash cam videos of men just like him dying on wet asphalt over bruised police egos. "I am complying," he said softly. "I am turning off the ignition. I am unbuckling my seatbelt. I am opening the door." He stepped out into the freezing rain. The cold water soaked instantly into his wool suit, chilling him to the bone. He stood at his full height of 6'2" and looked down at Kellerman. Even motionless, Elias carried an aura of undeniable authority. "Turn around," Kellerman barked, stepping forward aggressively. "Put your hands on the roof of the car. Spread your legs." Elias turned slowly in the rain, placing his palms flat against the slick, wet roof of the Lexus. He spread his feet. Kellerman moved in, kicking Elias's ankles farther apart with unnecessary force, nearly causing the older man to slip on the wet pavement. He began a frantic, aggressive pat-down. He dragged his hands up Elias's legs, checked his waistline, patted down his chest. He reached into the pockets, pulling out keys, a Mont Blanc fountain pen, and a folded handkerchief, tossing them carelessly onto the wet hood of the cruiser. "Where are the drugs?" Kellerman hissed near Elias's ear. "There are no drugs," Elias replied, voice a low, steady rumble over the storm. "There are no weapons. There is no stolen property. You are conducting an illegal search under the Fourth Amendment, lacking both probable cause and my consent." "I don't need your consent," Kellerman sneered, yanking Elias's arms violently behind his back. The sudden, sharp movement tore at Elias's rotator cuff, sending a bolt of white-hot pain through his shoulder. Elias winced, but did not cry out. "I'm taking you in," Kellerman said, breath hot and smelling of stale coffee. "You want to act like a lawyer. You can do it from a holding cell. You're under arrest." "For what crime?" Elias asked, maintaining his icy composure. "Resisting a lawful order, obstructing an investigation. I'll think of a few more on the drive down." Kellerman laughed darkly. He unclipped his steel handcuffs. Click, click. The cold metal bit violently into Elias's wrists. Kellerman ratcheted the cuffs down as tight as they would go, purposefully pinching the skin and compressing the ulnar nerve. Elias gritted his teeth as a sharp numbness shot into his hands. "You think you're so smart," Kellerman taunted, grabbing Elias by the back of his jacket collar and frog-marching him toward the cruiser. "People like you coming into this neighborhood talking down to me. I deal with garbage like you every day. I'm going to make sure the DA buries you. You're looking at a felony charge, Eli. That's prison time. Let's see how articulate you are when you're locked in a concrete box for 3 years. Jeez, deet. Elias stopped walking, even with his hands bound behind his back. He planted his feet firmly on the wet asphalt and turned his head to look Kellerman dead in the eye. The look in the judge's eyes was so piercing, so devoid of fear, that Kellerman involuntarily stopped pushing. "Officer Kellerman," Elias said softly, voice cutting through the rain with terrifying clarity. "I want you to remember everything you are doing right now. I want you to remember the threats you just made. I want you to remember the fabricated charges, because I assure you, by the time the sun rises, your life as you know it will be entirely over." Kellerman blinked, momentarily unsettled, but arrogance quickly swallowed the hesitation. He shoved Elias hard against the side of the cruiser. "Is that a threat?" he yelled. "You're threatening a police officer. Add that to the list, buddy. Get in the car." He opened the rear door and forcefully pushed Elias inside. Because Elias was tall, his head struck the doorframe hard as he was shoved downward. He collapsed onto the hard plastic back seat, bound arms twisted painfully beneath him. The door slammed shut with a deafening metallic thud. In the dark, claustrophobic rear of the squad car, smelling of disinfectant and stale sweat, Elias struggled to sit upright. His wrists were bleeding slightly from the tight steel, his tailored suit was ruined, and his head throbbed from the impact. Through the plexiglass partition, he watched Kellerman walk back to the Lexus. The officer grabbed the expensive leather briefcase from the passenger seat, tossed it carelessly into the front of the cruiser, and slammed the door. He did not even bother to secure the Lexus. He simply left it sitting on the roadside with its flashers on. Kellerman climbed into the driver's seat, dripping wet, and put the car in gear. He looked at Elias in the rearview mirror, a smug, victorious grin plastered across his face. "You're done, old man," he said. "Next stop, county lockup." Elias leaned his head back against the plastic seat and closed his eyes. The rage inside him was a quiet, controlled inferno. He was not merely a man who knew the law. He was a man who commanded the law. He had dedicated his life to the pursuit of justice, to ensuring that the power of the state was wielded fairly. And now he sat in the back of a police car, a victim of the exact systemic rot he fought against every day. He did not say another word. He did not scream. He did not beg. He did not reveal his identity. He simply sat in the darkness, letting the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers count down the final minutes of Officer Travis Kellerman's career. Kellerman had no idea. As the cruiser sped through the rainy streets toward the Oakmont Hills Police Department, the arrogant officer was busy mentally drafting a police report full of lies, completely oblivious to the catastrophic reality of what he had just done. He had not merely arrested an innocent man. He had arrested a sitting federal judge of the United States District Court, and Elias was going to let him dig his grave all the way to the bottom. The Oakmont Hills Police Department was a brick and glass fortress of municipal overfunding, complete with state-of-the-art holding cells and heavily polished granite floors. In the quiet hours, the precinct was a cavern of harsh fluorescent lights, echoing with the hum of vending machines and the sporadic chatter of dispatch. When Officer Travis Kellerman hauled Elias Quinn through the heavy double doors, the squeak of wet tactical boots broke the midnight monotony. Elias walked with his head held high, posture impeccably straight, despite his soaking, ruined bespoke suit and the agonizing pressure of the steel cuffs cutting off circulation to his hands. Behind the raised booking desk sat Desk Sergeant Harold Finch. Finch was 58, a heavy-set, world-weary veteran just 2 years from a comfortable pension. He had seen every type of criminal walk through those doors, yet as he peered over his reading glasses, his instincts flared. The man Kellerman was shoving toward the desk did not look like a burglar. He did not look like a vagrant or a drug dealer. He looked like a CEO who had been caught in a shipwreck. "What do we have, Kellerman?" Finch grunted, reaching for a blank intake form. "Got a live one tonight, Sarge." Kellerman boasted loudly enough for the younger officers in the adjacent squad room to hear. He shoved Elias roughly against the booking counter. "Caught him prowling through the residential sector, refused a lawful order, resisted arrest, obstructed my investigation, probably casing the neighborhood for the burglary ring. I want him in holding while I write up the felonies." Finch looked at Elias. He noticed the blood trickling down the left wrist, mixing with rainwater. He noticed the calm, unnervingly steady gaze of the suspect. "Name?" "Elias Quinn," Elias replied. His voice was a calm, deep resonance that seemed entirely out of place in a booking room. Finch paused. The name sounded vaguely familiar, though he could not place it. "Okay, Elias, turn around. Let's get those cuffs off for the search." Kellerman unlocked the cuffs, grinning. "Don't let him fool you, Sarge. He's a talker. Thinks he's a lawyer or something. Elias brought his hands forward slowly, wincing as blood rushed back into the severely bruised wrists. He did not rub them. He simply placed his hands flat on the booking counter and turned his penetrating gaze on Finch. "Sergeant," he said smoothly, "I am officially requesting that you preserve all dash cam and body cam footage from Officer Kellerman's vehicle and person from the moment of the stop onward. Furthermore, I am notifying you that I am being held without probable cause, and I request my phone to contact legal counsel." See. Kellerman let out a barking laugh. "Listen to this guy. Thinks he's on television. Dump your pockets, Eli." Elias ignored him entirely, keeping his eyes locked on Finch. The sergeant frowned. The precision of the man's language was unsettling. Usually suspects screamed, cried, or hurled profanities. They did not issue legal preservation directives. Annoyed by the stoicism, Kellerman grabbed the wet leather briefcase he had confiscated and slammed it onto the counter. He tossed the wallet, keys, and fountain pen beside it. "Here's his property. I'm going to get some dry clothes from my locker and start the paperwork. Put him in cell 2. Don't let him make a call until I say so." "You know that's not how it works, Travis," Finch sighed, rubbing his temples. "He gets a call after booking." Kellerman shot back, turning on his heel and swaggering down the hallway toward the locker room, entirely confident he was king of the castle. Left alone at the desk with Elias, Finch pulled on blue latex gloves to begin the mandatory property inventory. "All right, Mr. Quinn, I have to inventory your belongings before I can put you in a cell. Any weapons, needles, or contraband in this bag?" "None," Elias said quietly, "though I strongly advise you to pay close attention to the contents of that wallet and briefcase, Sergeant." Finch gave him a weary look. "Right." He opened the soaked leather wallet and pulled out the soggy driver's license. Elias Quinn. He wrote it down. He removed 3 crisp $100 bills, a Platinum American Express card, and a health insurance card. Standard items. Then his fingers brushed something heavy in the back compartment, a trifold credential case of thick embossed leather. He flipped it open. The overhead fluorescent light caught the gleam of a solid gold shield. Beneath it, sealed in tamper-proof government laminate, was an identification card bearing the seal of the United States Department of Justice. The text was printed in bold, undeniable letters. United States District Court, the Honorable Elias Quinn, Article 3 Judge. Finch stopped breathing. The air in the booking room seemed to evaporate. His eyes darted from the golden seal to the ID photo and then slowly up to the towering, quiet black man standing on the other side of the counter. "Oh, sweet Jesus," he whispered, face draining of all color. Elias did not blink. "If you open the briefcase, Sergeant, you will find the sentencing guidelines for a multi-million-dollar federal embezzlement case I am presiding over in the morning. Documents that Officer Kellerman has now unlawfully seized." Finch's hands shook so violently he dropped the credential case onto the desk. A cold sweat broke across his neck. He had been a cop for 30 years. He knew the hierarchy of power. A patrol officer sat at the bottom of the food chain. A federal judge was a god. A sitting Article 3 judge appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate possessed power that could erase the entire Oakmont Hills Police Department with a single injunction. "Your Honor," Finch stammered, voice cracking. He practically ripped the latex gloves from his hands. "Your Honor, I had no idea." "I am aware, Sergeant Finch," Elias said softly. "You did not pull me over. You did not assault me. You did not fabricate charges against me." "I'm releasing you right now," Finch said frantically, reaching for the override keys. "I'll get your car brought here. I'll personally drive you home. We can clear this all up. It's a massive misunderstanding, sir." "Do not touch those keys," Elias commanded. The volume of his voice barely rose, yet the absolute crushing authority behind it froze Finch in his tracks. "Sir, I have been formally placed under arrest by an officer of your department," Elias stated, eyes burning with cold, righteous fury. "I have been subjected to an illegal search, an unconstitutional seizure, and physical assault. I have been threatened with fabricated felony charges to intimidate me. If I were any other black man from the city, I would currently be locked in that cell, facing a ruined life because of the perjury of an arrogant man with a badge. I am not leaving. Judge Quinn, please." "Ori." "You are going to call your chief," Elias interrupted, tone leaving no room for debate. "You will wake him. You will tell him to come down here immediately, and you will not tell Officer Kellerman a single thing until the chief arrives. Am I understood, Sergeant?" Finch looked at the federal credentials and then at the bleeding wrists of the most powerful man he had ever met. "Yes, Your Honor. Right away, Your Honor." Chief of Police Vincent Harlan was deeply asleep in his sprawling suburban home when his cell phone began to vibrate violently on the nightstand. At 52, Harlan was a political survivor. He had spent years carefully managing the wealthy, demanding residents of Oakmont Hills, keeping crime statistics virtually non-existent, and ensuring his department remained fully funded. He fumbled for the phone, squinting at the bright screen. It was the precinct desk. "Harlan," he grumbled, voice thick with sleep. "Chief, it's Sergeant Finch. You need to get down to the precinct right now." Harlan sat up, rubbing his eyes. Finch was not the type to panic. "Tommy, what's going on?" "We have something worse than a homicide." Finch's voice was a ragged, terrified whisper. "Kellerman brought a guy in, traffic stop, charged him with resisting, obstruction, the whole 9 yards. And?" Harlan sighed, already reaching for his pants. "Kellerman's an aggressive idiot. But why are you waking me for a traffic dispute?" "Chief," Finch said, pausing as if the words physically burned his throat, "the suspect is Elias Quinn." Harlan froze. The name hit him like a physical blow to the chest. Vincent Harlan was not merely a local cop. He had spent a decade as an investigator for the state attorney's office before taking the chief's job. He knew every major player in the regional justice system. He knew Elias Quinn. Quinn was legendary. He was the judge who had fearlessly dismantled the Rossi crime family. He was the judge who had held 2 FBI agents in contempt for lying on a warrant. Quinn was brilliant, ruthless in his application of the law, and absolutely terrifying when crossed. "Tommy," Chief Harlan breathed, blood roaring in his ears. "Please tell me you are joking. Please tell me you have a different Elias Quinn." "Black guy, 60s, custom suit. I'm staring at his gold DOJ shield right now, Chief." Kellerman handcuffed him, threw him in the back of the cruiser. "He's bleeding, Chief. His wrists are bleeding." Harlan dropped the phone. A wave of profound existential nausea washed over him. He scrambled out of bed, not even bothering to change out of his pajama shirt. He threw a heavy winter coat over it, shoved bare feet into loafers, and sprinted for his SUV. As he tore out of the driveway, breaking every speed limit toward the station, his mind raced through the catastrophic fallout: false arrest, assault under color of law, civil rights violations, a Section 1983 federal lawsuit. The Department of Justice would descend on Oakmont Hills like a swarm of locusts. The media would have a field day. White suburb cops brutalize black federal judge. His career was over. The city would be bankrupted by the settlement. Meanwhile, back at the precinct, Officer Kellerman was in the break room pouring himself a fresh cup of coffee. He had changed into a dry uniform shirt and felt incredibly pleased with himself. A young rookie, Officer Cole Simmons, was heating pasta in the microwave. "Rough night out there, Travis?" Simmons asked, nodding at Kellerman's wet hair. "Nothing I can't handle," Kellerman smirked, taking a sip of the hot coffee. "Just had to put some city trash in his place. Guy was driving a 90 grand Lexus through my sector, giving me lip. Thinks because he wears a suit, he can talk down to me." "What did you hit him with?" "Failure to maintain lane to get him stopped." Kellerman laughed openly, admitting to the pretextual stop without a care in the world. "Then he refused to step out, so I yanked him out, tagged him with resisting arrest. Obstruction. I'm going to talk to the DA tomorrow, see if we can tack on a felony intimidation charge. I want to see this guy sweat in county lockup for the weekend." "Damn," Simmons chuckled nervously. "You don't mess around." "Damn right I don't." Kellerman puffed out his chest. "This is our town. You gotta let these people know they can't just wander in here and act like they own the place." He tossed his empty sugar packet into the trash and walked out of the break room, heading toward the booking desk to collect his paperwork. He expected to see his suspect locked safely in cell 2, humiliated and defeated. Instead, he walked into a scene of absolute chaos. The heavy glass doors of the precinct flew open, crashing violently against the security stoppers. Chief Vincent Harlan stormed in, coat flapping open to reveal his plaid pajama shirt, face an apoplectic shade of crimson. He was breathing heavily, eyes darting wildly until they locked onto the booking desk. Judge Elias Quinn sat calmly on a wooden bench against the wall, sipping a cup of water Sergeant Finch had provided. He looked up as the chief entered, expression completely unreadable. Harlan ignored his own officers entirely. He practically threw himself across the room, stopping 3 feet from Elias. The chief of police, a man who commanded absolute obedience in this town, removed his hat and bowed his head slightly. "Judge Quinn," he said, voice trembling with a mixture of terror and deep, groveling respect. "Your Honor, I cannot begin to apologize. I am profoundly, deeply sorry. This is a catastrophic failure of my department." Kellerman, who had just stepped into the hallway, froze. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers, hitting the floor and shattering, splashing hot brown liquid across the polished granite. "Judge, Your Honor!" The words echoed in Kellerman's brain, refusing to compute. He stared at the older black man he had just threatened with prison time. He remembered the calm demeanor. He remembered the warnings. "I want you to remember the threats you just made. By the time the sun rises, your life as you know it will be entirely over." "Chief!" Kellerman squeaked, voice cracking like a terrified adolescent. "Chief, what's going on? Who is this guy?" Harlan turned slowly. The look of groveling apology vanished, replaced by murderous, unadulterated hatred directed squarely at Travis Kellerman. "Shut your mouth, Kellerman," he roared, voice booming through the station. "Do not say another word. Stand against that wall and do not move a single muscle." He turned back to Elias, visibly sweating. "Your Honor, I will personally drive you home. We will drop all charges immediately. There will be no record of this. And I assure you, Officer Kellerman will be severely disciplined. He will be suspended without pay pending an internal review." Elias placed his plastic water cup gently onto the bench. He stood up slowly, towering over the chief of police. He looked at Harlan, then past him, locking eyes with the pale, shivering officer. "Chief Harlan," Elias said, voice echoing in the dead silence of the precinct, "I do not want an apology. I do not want a quiet ride home. And I certainly do not want an internal review conducted behind closed doors." Harlan swallowed hard. "What do you want, Your Honor?" "Officer Kellerman arrested me under color of law, depriving me of my constitutional rights," Elias stated, stepping forward. "He fabricated evidence, committed perjury in his initial verbal report, and physically assaulted me. Therefore, I am not leaving this precinct. Instead, I suggest you call the local field office. I want Special Agent in Charge Dominic Reeves of the FBI down here immediately to open a federal civil rights investigation. And until he arrives, I want Officer Kellerman's badge and service weapon placed on this desk." Elias's eyes drifted back to Kellerman, cold and unrelenting. "Because," he finished, "Officer Kellerman is no longer a police officer. He is a federal suspect." The silence in the precinct was deafening, heavy and suffocating, like the calm eye of a hurricane. Chief Vincent Harlan stood frozen, color completely drained from his face. He looked at Elias Quinn, standing tall and resolute, then turned his gaze to Officer Travis Kellerman. Kellerman was trembling. The bravado that had fueled his entire adult life, the badge, the gun, the power to ruin lives on a whim, was vaporizing before his eyes. "Chief," Kellerman pleaded, voice a pathetic, reedy whine. "Chief, you can't be serious. He was swerving. He refused a lawful order. You're going to take the word of a suspect over your own officer?" "Shut your damn mouth, Travis," Harlan hissed, stepping toward the younger officer. The instinct for self-preservation had fully overridden any sense of loyalty. He knew that if he did not comply with Elias's exact demands, he would be indicted right alongside Kellerman for conspiracy to cover up a federal crime. "Hand over your weapon. Unclip the duty belt. Now." "Chief, please." "Do it," Harlan roared, the sound echoing off the polished granite floors. Shaking uncontrollably, Kellerman fumbled with the thick black plastic buckle of his duty belt. His fingers lacked their usual dexterity. Finally, the buckle gave way, and the heavy belt, carrying his Glock 19, his taser, his cuffs, and his radio, slid from his waist and hit the floor with a loud metallic clatter. He unpinned his silver Oakmont Hills badge from his chest, hand hovering for a moment before he dropped it onto the booking desk, right next to Elias's gold Department of Justice shield. "Go sit in the interrogation room," Harlan ordered, pointing a trembling finger down the hall. "Do not touch your phone. Do not speak to anyone." As Kellerman shuffled away, a hollow shell of the tyrant he had been an hour earlier, Harlan turned back to Elias. "Your Honor, I will make the call to the field office immediately." For the next stretch of time, the Oakmont Hills Police Department felt like a morgue. Elias sat patiently on the wooden bench, having finally accepted a clean, dry towel from a terrified Officer Simmons to drape over his soaking shoulders. He did not pace. He did not speak. He simply waited, his presence acting as an oppressive weight on every officer in the building. When the glass doors of the precinct slid open again, the atmosphere in the room shifted violently. 4 men in dark suits walked in, led by Special Agent in Charge, Dominic Reeves. Reeves was a towering, broad-shouldered man with close-cropped silver hair and the grim, unyielding demeanor of someone who had spent 2 decades dismantling organized crime syndicates and corrupt politicians. Following closely behind him were 3 armed federal agents wearing tactical vests emblazoned with the bright yellow letters FBI. Reeves bypassed the booking desk entirely, eyes locking onto Elias. A look of deep, genuine concern crossed the veteran agent's face. He had worked with Judge Quinn for years, securing warrants and testifying in his courtroom. "Elias," he said, extending a hand. "Are you all right?" "I am bruised, Agent Reeves, but I am unharmed," Elias replied, shaking the man's hand firmly. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Reeves's eyes dropped to Elias's wrists. The deep purple contusions and the dried blood where the handcuffs had bitten into the skin were impossible to miss. His jaw tightened into a hard, unforgiving line. He turned slowly to face Chief Harlan. "Chief Harlan," he said, voice deceptively quiet, "I am officially taking jurisdiction of this precinct. My agents will be locking down your server room to preserve all digital evidence, including dispatch logs, body cam footage, and dash cam video. Where is the officer responsible for this?" "Interrogation room A, Agent Reeves." Harlan swallowed hard. "Before we speak to him," Elias interjected smoothly, "I believe it would be prudent to review the audio-visual evidence of the traffic stop. Officer Kellerman was quite confident that I was swerving, resisting arrest, and casing the neighborhood. Let us see what the cameras captured." Harlan gestured weakly to Sergeant Finch. "Tommy, pull up Unit 4's dash cam and body cam on the main monitor." Finch typed quickly, bringing up the precinct's main server display on the large wall-mounted television above the booking desk. "I have the dash cam, Chief, but—" He hesitated, clicking the mouse frantically. "Kellerman's body cam, the file is empty. It looks like he manually powered it down right before he exited the cruiser." A collective gasp swept through the room. Kellerman had purposefully killed his microphone and chest camera so there would be no audio of his racial slurs and fabricated threats. It was a classic dirty cop maneuver. "He turned it off," Harlan whispered, burying his face in his hands. He knew how this looked to the FBI. It looked like an institutional cover-up. But Special Agent Reeves simply smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "Chief Harlan," he said, pulling an encrypted tablet from his briefcase, "are you aware of the Department of Justice grant your city accepted last year to upgrade your vehicle fleets?" Harlan looked up, confused. "Yes, we installed the new Axon Fleet 3 systems." "Exactly." Reeves nodded, tapping rapidly on the tablet. "And as part of that federal grant, those systems came with an automatic tamper-proof redundancy protocol. The moment Officer Kellerman activated his overhead light bar, the dual microphone array inside the cruiser began recording. It syncs with the officer's lapel mic via Bluetooth. Even if he powers down his primary chest camera, the cruiser's system continues recording raw audio, uploading it directly to an encrypted cloud server that your local IT department cannot access, nor can they delete it. He looked at Elias. "With your permission, Your Honor." "Proceed," Elias said. Reeves connected the tablet to the wall monitor. The screen flickered, showing the high-definition, wide-angle view from Kellerman's dashboard. Rain lashed against the windshield. The black Lexus sat pulled over perfectly on the shoulder. Then the audio kicked in, crystal clear. The entire precinct stood in dead silence as the true events of the night echoed through the room. They heard Elias's calm, perfectly polite, legally sound responses. And they heard Kellerman's vile escalation. Don't get smart with me, boy." The racial slur hung in the air like toxic smoke. Chief Harlan closed his eyes, physically sickened. "I'm going to make sure the DA buries you. You're looking at a felony charge, Eli. That's prison time. Let's see how articulate you are when you're locked in a concrete box for 3 years." The recording ended with the deafening thud of Kellerman slamming Elias's head into the doorframe of the cruiser. Agent Reeves disconnected the tablet and handed it to one of his agents. "Agent Simmons, go to Interrogation Room A. Place Travis Kellerman under federal arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law. Title 18, United States Code, Section 242. Read him his Miranda rights. If he speaks, document it. If he resists, you have my full authorization to use force." 2 FBI agents drew their handcuffs and marched down the hallway. Seconds later, the muffled sound of Kellerman shouting in panic echoed from the back rooms. "I'm a cop. You can't do this. Chief, help me." The shouts were abruptly cut off by the heavy thud of a body being slammed against a wall, followed by the distinctive metallic click-click of federal handcuffs locking into place. Elias Quinn adjusted his ruined suit jacket. He looked at Chief Harlan, who looked like a man standing on the gallows, watching the lever being pulled. "Chief Harlan," Elias said, voice devoid of anger, replaced only by a cold, clinical certainty. "You run a department where an officer felt entirely comfortable turning off his camera, fabricating multiple felony charges, and assaulting a compliant citizen in the street simply because he believed his badge granted him absolute immunity. Tomorrow I am calling the Attorney General. The Oakmont Hills Police Department is going to be placed under a federal consent decree. Every arrest Officer Kellerman has made in the past 5 years will be audited, and you will be answering to a federal grand jury regarding your department's training and oversight." All right. He turned to Agent Reeves. "Dominic, I am going home now." "I have an agent outside with your keys, Elias," Reeves said softly. "He will drive your car to your house. You ride with me." As Illis walked out of the precinct, the red and blue lights of the FBI vehicles reflecting off the wet pavement, he did not look back. Inside, Travis Kellerman was being dragged out in chains, finally experiencing the terrifying, inescapable weight of the justice system he had so eagerly weaponized against others. The fallout was catastrophic, immediate, and heavily publicized. By the next morning, the story had broken. Major news networks ran the headline on a continuous loop. "Racist suburban cop arrests black federal judge. FBI takes over precinct." The dash cam audio leaked inevitably to the press, played on every radio station and morning show in the country. Public outrage was a tidal wave. Mayor Leonard Crane of Oakmont Hills held an emergency press conference the following afternoon, visibly sweating under the harsh camera lights. He announced the immediate forced resignation of Chief Vincent Harlan and welcomed the Department of Justice's civil rights investigation with open arms and full transparency. It was a desperate attempt to save the city from the inevitable multi-million-dollar lawsuits already piling up. But the true drama unfolded months later inside the soaring mahogany-paneled walls of the United States District Courthouse, the very building where Elias Quinn reigned supreme. Travis Kellerman's trial was swift and brutal. Stripped of his badge, his union backing, and his unearned swagger, Kellerman sat at the defense table looking small, pale, and terrified. His high-priced defense attorney had attempted every trick in the book, claiming the audio was taken out of context, claiming Kellerman felt threatened, begging for a plea deal. The federal prosecutors declined everything. They wanted accountability. Elias Quinn did not preside over the case, of course. He was the star witness. When he took the stand, the courtroom fell into an absolute breathless hush. He wore a pristine charcoal gray suit, silver hair perfectly trimmed, posture immaculately straight. He recounted the events of that rainy night with clinical precision. He did not embellish. He did not need to. The raw, unfiltered truth of the dash cam audio, paired with the quiet dignity of his testimony, painted a devastating picture. "Judge Quinn," the federal prosecutor asked during direct examination, "when the defendant threatened to lock you in a concrete box for 3 years, did you fear for your life?" Elias looked across the courtroom, locking eyes with Kellerman. Kellerman could not hold his gaze. He stared down at his shackled hands. "I did not fear for my life, counselor," Elias replied, deep voice carrying easily to the gallery. I knew who I was, and I knew the immense power of the office I hold would ultimately protect me. But what terrified me, what breaks my heart even now, is the absolute certainty that if I had been a 22-year-old college student or a father driving home from a late shift at a factory, I would currently be in state prison. The defendant's actions were not an aberration. They were a routine. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When the verdict was read, Travis Kellerman stood on shaking legs. On the charge of deep privation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault by a peace officer, we find the defendant guilty. Presiding Judge Theodore Langford, a man known for his merciless sentencing, looked down at Kellerman with open disgust. "Mr. Kellerman," he boomed, "you were entrusted with a badge and a gun to protect the public. Instead, you use them as tools of terror, motivated by nothing more than your own vile prejudice and a grotesque abuse of authority. You picked the wrong man on the wrong night, and in doing so, you exposed a rot that this court will not tolerate." Langford banged his gavel. "I sentence you to 84 months in a maximum security federal penitentiary, to be followed by 10 years of supervised release. You are remanded immediately to the custody of the United States Marshals." A choked sob escaped Kellerman's throat as the marshals grabbed his arms, roughly pulling his hands behind his back to apply the heavy steel chains. Click, click. The sound echoed in the courtroom, a poetic, devastating mirror to the cuffs he had slapped onto Elias Quinn's wrists months earlier. Elias watched from the back row of the gallery as Kellerman was led away through the side door, his career, his freedom, and his reputation completely destroyed by his own arrogance. Elias stood, buttoning his suit jacket. He walked out of the courtroom, passing through the heavy oak doors and stepping into the bright, clear afternoon sunlight. He descended the wide marble steps of the courthouse, acknowledging the respectful nods of the federal marshals and passing attorneys. He climbed into his repaired, perfectly clean Lexus LS. As he started the engine, he looked at his wrists. The bruises had long since faded, but the memory of the cold steel remained. Justice had been served that day. One bad officer had been removed from the streets. Yet Elias knew the truth of his profession. Tomorrow the sun would rise and there would be more work to do. He shifted the car into drive, pulling smoothly into the flow of traffic, ready to return to the bench and continue the fight. Power, arrogance, and prejudice form a dangerous combination. But as this story proves, nobody is above the law, especially when they cross the very man who enforces it. Officer Kellerman believed his badge gave him the right to ruin a man's life. Justice served him a heavy dose of his own medicine. True authority does not come from a gun or a badge. It comes from integrity. If this story of ultimate karma and justice kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life stories where the truth fights back. Leave a comment below. What would you have done in Judge Quinn's shoes? See you in the next one.